The ride on the Underground Railroad is plagued with exhaustion, hunger, terror, and hope. Located in the bustling port city of Wilmington, Delaware, is the home of free blacks Abraham and Harriet Shadd and their 13 children. This same home provides refuge to countless fugitive slaves seeking temporary comfort of warmth and food. The benefits of safe houses like the Shadds are immeasurable. The selflessness exhibited by abolitionist Mr. and Mrs. Shadd are easily recognizable, not only to historians and students reading about their work today, but to their own children in the 19th century as well. MaryAnn Shadd Cary, the eldest child of Mr. and Mrs. Shadd, was greatly influenced by her parents' abolitionist work. Though their home in Delaware provided aid to many in need, the city was not as generous. Delaware was becoming increasingly oppressive in its laws, and as a result, educational opportunities for Black people were non-existent. Each morning, young white children arose from their beds, dressed for school, and were ushered off to their respective learning halls. But young Black children, like MaryAnn Shadd and her siblings, could only hope for a lesson. Dedicated parents, Mr. and Mrs. Shadd, moved from their Delaware home further north to Pennsylvania in order to provide their children with a decent education. At the age of 10, MaryAnn enrolled into a Quaker boarding school. 6 short years later, the ambitious and confident MaryAnn took on her own role as an educator for free Blacks. At times, MaryAnn was afforded with teaching opportunities in well-kept buildings with classroom materials, school books, and a paid salary. Other times, MaryAnn taught in a one-room abandoned building without desk, books, or pay. In her own words, "There are at least 40 children of suitable age and many grown persons who would frequent the day school and who pled inability to pay as an excuse for not sending or attending now. The frequent arrivals make an exact estimate of a difficult matter, but in a school among fugitives, grown persons contribute largely to the numbers. I'm convinced, as the sum realized from a day school at 1 shilling per week and an evening school for adults at 6 pence, is insufficient to support anyone comfortably and is accompanied by protestations of poverty." MaryAnn's teaching efforts led her all around the Free States. During one stay in New York City, her poised spirit left such an impression on one man that the words he used to describe her were published in abolitionist newspapers such as Frederick Douglass's North Star. The man recalls, "In New York and coming down Broadway at a time when colored women scarcely dared to think of riding in the stages, Miss Shadd threw up her head, gave one look and a wave of her hand. There was such an impressive command in it that the huge, coarse, refinely driver, who had been known to refuse colored ladies, as though suddenly seized with paralysis, reined up to the curb and she entered, and without hindrance rode to the end of her journey. MaryAnn's confidence and determination helped her break down many barriers. Following the Fugitive State Law of 1850, which made it permissible for any white slave owner to claim that any Black man or woman was a runaway slave and force them into slavery without even a trial, 26-year-old MaryAnn and her younger brother Isaac Shadd continued their journey toward freedom. This time, even farther north, to Canada. Self-reliance is the fine road to independence. These words rang throughout Canada and parts of the United States to the ears of the Black and educated elite. Readers of the Provincial Freeman, the newest journal published in Canada, edited by no other than MaryAnn Shadd herself, was a stomping ground for many controversial stories. Published weekly, the Provincial Freeman advocated for equality, integration, and self-education for Black people in Canada and the United States. The paper's tone toward white America was a lot more aggressively critical than other African Americans living in the North, including Frederick Douglass. July 4th, 1856, Frederick Douglass' paper, The North Star, published this about MaryAnn and her work with the Freemen. The press became a necessity and was bravely supplied by Miss MaryAnn Shadd. This lady, with very little assistance from others, has sustained the Provincial Freeman for more than 2 years. She has had to contend with lukewarmness, false friends, open enemies, ignorance, and small pecuniary means. The tone of her paper has been at times harsh and complaining, and whatever may be thought or felt of this, we are bound to bear testimony to the unceasing industry, the unconquerable zeal, and the commendable ability which she has shown. We do not know her equal among the colored ladies of the United States. MaryAnn's words continue to catch her readers by storm. She challenges Black clergymen, begging societies, and refutes racial stereotypes. One day, MaryAnn reads an article published in an anti-slavery journal ran by white Canadians. The article encouraged prohibition laws that would be passed for Black men and women only. The writer of the article recounted a situation in which an inebriated Black man behaved inappropriately. The situation, the author argued, served as evidence that no Black person knew how to drink responsibly and therefore should lose the right. Cary's response criticized the anti-slavery journal as a whole for its subtle racism and also for its biased claim. She writes, "One colored man passed under your office window drunk, and if he had not hurt somebody, he might have done so. Bah! They must be out of a subject to write about down at that office. Every colored man must be prohibited from drinking because one drank freely. Who patronized the saloons, taverns, etc. in this place? Indians and colored men only? No. We believe in passing a strictly prohibitory law that will not only prevent Indians and colored men from getting drunk, but will also stop white men from drinking as well, and not only the inferior classes above Chatham, but a drunken editor occasionally." To the fake abolitionist, MaryAnn writes, "All around we hear much of anti-slavery. Men now have a measure of glory in being abolitionists since the thought of security against any more ebony editions on this continent is prevailing. The thousands who flock to the standard are only required to use the Shibboleth abolition in order to be received into the household of anti-slavery faith. Such proselytes are not to be relied upon, much less should they be tolerated as orthodox on a subject of such great importance. We are an abolitionist. We do not want the slave to remain in his chains a second. Whether the master gets paid or not is a point of no importance to us whatever. Strictly speaking, however, he has no claim to him and should not therefore have pay for that which he has not shadow of right. We go further. We want that the colored man should live in America, should plant his tree deep in the soil, and whether he turns white or his neighbors turn Black by reason of residence is of no moment. He must have his rights, must not be driven to Africa, nor obliged to stay in the States if he desires to go elsewhere. We must confess to their views as objectionable as we know them to be. But this does not close our eyes against the humbug connected with this abolitionist reform, some phrases of which would cause a worm-eating New Hollander to hide his head from very disgust." MaryAnn refuted ideologies and people who called themselves abolitionists and activists but failed to behave in the most honest and just manner. She also believed idealism, naivety, and words without action held no place in the abolitionist movement, a claim that few would disagree with. Be a knowledgeable, active abolitionist or do not be one at all. On June 5th, 1893, Mrs. MaryAnn Shadd Cary lay down to her final rest. Her pioneer work and resilience under adversity make her a most impressive and important figure during the abolitionist movement.